Welcome to Midnight Whispers. Tonight we're stepping past the rusted gates where moonlight spills over cracked tombstones and the air tastes like earth and secrets. The wind moves, but it whispers. Names you don't know yet somehow recognize. Shadows stretch too long, curling around forgotten graves as if they're reaching for you. Somewhere a bell tolls, though no church stands nearby. This is where silence is loud, where every crunch of gravel feels like an invitation or a warning. Stay close, keep the light on, and whatever you do, don't look back. Story number 1: I never believed in ghosts. Not really. Not until the summer I turned 42 when my wife left me. My mother died and I moved into the creaking old house on Bray Hollow Road to try and make some kind of sense of the mess I'd made of my life. It was supposed to be temporary, a few months to regroup. The house had been my grandfather's once, a sprawling colonial farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere, tucked between overgrown cornfields and the rusting skeletons of old tractors long since forgotten. The nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile down a dirt track that washed out every time it rained. The grave was behind the house. That's where it starts. I found it on my second day, a small, unmarked mound maybe 20 feet from the edge of the woods. The ground had been disturbed recently, a rough oval of churned earth maybe 3 feet wide with clumps of dry grass curling around the edges like dead fingers. There was no marker. No cross, no stone, not even a stick. Just dirt and silence. At first I thought it was an animal, maybe a dog or a deer that had wandered into the yard and died. It happens out here. But when I went to take a closer look, I noticed the shovel marks. Clean, deliberate cuts into the soil, like someone had dug deep and then tamped it back down again in a hurry. I didn't think much of it then. Maybe a hunter burying a kill. Maybe some sick kid screwing around. It was weird, sure, but not terrifying. Not yet. That night I barely slept. The house made sounds I wasn't used to. Groaning floorboards, faint clanks in the pipes, the whisper of wind through broken window seals. I kept the bedroom light on like a child, ashamed of how the dark pressed in through the cracked panes like something living. The next morning, I noticed the grave had moved. Not far. Just a foot, maybe less, but it was closer to the path that wound around the house toward the woods. I stood there staring at it, blinking like I might be wrong. The sunlight was harsh and flat, the way it gets in August when everything feels too dry, too bright. I crouched and measured the distance with my hands. I wasn't wrong. It had shifted, I thought. Erosion, maybe. Or some animal digging from beneath. I knelt and brushed the soil with my fingers. The earth was soft, loamy, and still freshly turned. And it had definitely moved. That night, I left the bedroom light on again. Around 2 a.m., I woke to a sound. A rhythmic, dull thump, thump. Thump from somewhere outside the window. I lay there holding my breath, listening. It wasn't wind. It wasn't a tree branch. It was too methodical, too steady. It stopped after maybe 5 minutes, and I didn't have the courage to go look. At sunrise, the grave was closer. Another foot. Something was digging. From beneath, I told myself it was all in my head. I hadn't been sleeping well. I'd been drinking too much. The grief over my mother's death, the divorce, it was catching up with me. I was unraveling. I told myself all of that, but I still went out and bought a motion-activated trail camera that day. I'd seen enough in the woods as a kid to know they don't lie. You can scream ghost all you want, but a camera either catches something or it doesn't. I set it up facing the mound, checked the batteries, and sat on the porch with a bottle of bourbon as night fell. The sound came again. Thump, thump, thump. Like something striking wood, or struggling to push through hard-packed earth. This time I counted. 11 minutes. At dawn I went out. The grave was nearly at the path. I checked the camera. Nothing. Not a single frame. The card was fine. The batteries were full. But every frame between midnight and 4 a.m. was black. Not even static, just absence. A hole in time. I drove the camera back to the store and got another. A different brand. Installed it, pointed it lower, set up a second camera just in case. The grave kept moving. Every midnight it inched closer, always closer to the path. On the 6th night I dug it up. I don't know what made me do it. Desperation maybe, or madness, or that kind of thick-blooded fear that presses behind your eyes and convinces you the only way out is through. I waited until sunset. Got the shovel from the shed. It was rusted but solid. I started digging. The dirt came up easy at first. Then harder, wetter. Maybe 4 feet down, the shovel hit wood. I dropped to my knees and scraped away the last of the soil with my hands. It was a coffin. Small. Child-sized. Old, but not ancient. The wood was cracked and weather-stained, but the nails were modern. I hesitated. My breath felt tight in my throat. I reached for the lid. The wood moaned as I lifted it. There was nothing inside. Not empty. Nothing. A hollow space that looked far deeper than it should have been. A blackness that swallowed the weak beam of my flashlight. No bottom. Just dark. I slammed the lid shut, heart pounding, and reburied it, packed the soil down tight, told myself I was done. That whatever sick joke or hallucination this was, I wasn't playing anymore. But that night, the grave moved 2 feet, and the next night, it crossed the path. That's when the dream started. I'd see her. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8. Thin, with stringy black hair and a white dress stained brown at the hem. She would stand at the edge of my bed, her eyes black voids, and whisper, "Let me in." Over and over. I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. Just lay there frozen, sweat slicking my skin as she leaned closer. The scent of dirt and rot thick in the air. Then I'd wake up, heart hammering, throat raw from choking back screams. Every morning, the grave was closer to the house. I started drinking more. A bottle a night, sometimes 2. I kept every light on. Nailed shut the windows. Slept with the shotgun across my lap, though I knew damn well it wouldn't matter. The sound never stopped. The thump, 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 like something clawing upward, relentless and slow. One night I didn't sleep at all. Sat on the couch, eyes bloodshot, watching the hallway. Around 12:14, the front door creaked open. Just a hair. Enough to groan on the hinges. I stood, shotgun aimed. Nothing. Then the footsteps started. Slow. Wet. A dragging sound across old wood. I fired. Once, twice. The blast echoed through the house like a scream. Nothing. No blood. No body. Just silence. At dawn, the grave was at the porch. I left that day. Packed a duffel, got in the truck, and drove. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't call. Just drove west until the gas ran out and refilled and kept going. I stayed in motels, cheap ones with blinking vacancy signs and damp carpets. I didn't sleep well, but I wasn't haunted for 3 days then. In a rest stop outside Amarillo, I saw her. She was standing by the vending machines, barefoot, that same white dress hanging like old gauze. No one else seemed to notice her. She turned and her eyes were pits of darkness. She smiled. Not cruel, just inevitable. She was following me now. I went back. It was the only way. Back to Bray Hollow Road, the house, the porch. The grave was gone. I searched the yard, nothing, until I looked up. She was on the roof, crouched like an animal. Her hands dug into the shingles. Eyes wide, mouth a torn slit of teeth. She didn't move. Just watched as I approached. I think I screamed. I don't remember. The next day's blurred. I tried to burn the coffin. Dug it up again, doused it in gasoline. Lit the match. The fire died the second it touched the wood. Just snuffed out. No smoke, no heat. Like the flames were being swallowed. I called a priest. He came. Old man, Polish accent, quiet hands. He stepped 1 foot into the yard and vomited. Said the ground was cursed. Told me to leave. Said, it's not her. It's what was under her. He never came back. I boarded up the house. Left the cameras. Locked the doors, then I watched. Every midnight the grave reappeared. Not always in the same place. Sometimes near the path, sometimes by the shed. Once right beneath the kitchen window, always moving. Always closer and always she followed. Now it's been 6 weeks. I haven't left the property. I don't sleep. I barely eat. My skin itches like something's crawling beneath it. The grave is beneath the porch now. I can hear it every night. Thump, thump, thump. I don't know what she is. I don't know what I let out, but I know this. At midnight, something will crawl from that earth. Something that wears the skin of a little girl. And if I'm not watching, not waiting, she'll come inside, and then it'll be too late. Last night I heard her whisper through the keyhole. Let me in, just once. Let me in and I'll never leave. Tonight, I might say yes. I don't think I can hold out much longer. If you're reading this, if you find this paper in the desk drawer or the bloody smears across the floor, listen to me. Do not follow the sound. Do not open the door. And whatever you do not look at the grave after midnight, because it always moves. And eventually, it will move for you. Story number 2. I've never liked cemeteries. That might sound strange coming from someone who spent nearly a year living in one. Not literally, of course, but close enough. I was 37 when everything unraveled. Lost my job at the county surveyor's office. Lost my apartment 3 months later. And then lost what was left of my pride shortly after. My Uncle Jeff had passed the year before and left me his caretaker's cottage out in Halford Hollow. A town so small and dead-end it didn't even show up on some GPS systems. The cottage sat just past the gate of Bell Run Cemetery, a crumbling old graveyard on the edge of town. Halford's founding families were buried there, rows of lichen-covered headstones leaning like drunks in the fog. The place was quiet, overgrown, and almost forgotten. Just the kind of refuge I thought I needed at the time. Peace. Solitude. A place to start over. I told myself it would just be a temporary arrangement. A couple of months to regroup, then back on my feet. I moved in during early September, right as the leaves were turning and the sky had that low, bruised look it gets before the first frost. The cottage was old but sturdy, with a coal stove, creaky floors, and windows that whined in the wind. It smelled like mothballs and cedar. I kind of liked it. For the first few weeks, nothing strange happened. I cleaned the place up, mowed the knee-high grass between the graves, and settled into a strange but manageable routine. No one came to visit. Most of the families who had buried loved ones here were long gone, and the ones still around went to the newer cemetery on the north end of town. Bell Run was where the dead stayed dead, except for one part. There's a hill at the rear of the property, a shallow rise with a view of the woods. That's where the angel is, maybe 10 feet tall, carved from white marble that had long since cracked and yellowed with age. Her wings were outstretched, chipped and moss-covered, and her face was turned just slightly to the left, as if she were listening for something. Her mouth was open just a little, not in a smile or a cry, but something in between. That mouth always made me uneasy. The locals avoided her. I found that out from Iris, the old librarian who ran the historical society across from the diner. She was the only one who really talked to me when I moved in, and even then only with the wary politeness reserved for strangers who've stayed too long. You keep the grass cut out there. You stay out of trouble, no one will bother you, she said one morning over black coffee. But don't go up near the angel after dark. Folks don't like it. I asked her why. She just shook her head. Some things are old and wrong. Been here long before us. The statue's one of them. Best to leave it be. I didn't listen, of course. It started with the whisper. I'd just come back from town, groceries in hand, walking the gravel path toward the cottage. The sun was sinking behind the trees, throwing long shadows between the gravestones. As I passed the rise where the angel stood, I thought I heard someone say my name. Not shout it. Whisper it. Like a breath blown through dry leaves. I turned. Nothing. Just the statue backlit by the fading light, her cracked wings stretching into the dimming sky. I waited, listened. Nothing again. The next morning I went up the hill. The ground around the statue was uneven and worn, the grass sparse. I touched the marble. It was ice cold. There was something under the surface that made my fingers twitch, a faint vibration, like the hum of a running motor too deep to hear. Only felt in the bones. I pulled my hand away and left. That night, I dreamed of water, black, bottomless water. I was floating on it, face up, unable to move. All around me were voices muttering in a language I didn't recognize. The words twisted like eels, slippery and wrong. But one sound repeated again and again, my name. When I woke, my mouth was full of dirt. Not metaphorically. Actual dirt, packed under my tongue, clinging to my teeth as if I'd been gnawing at the ground in my sleep. I stumbled to the sink, retching, spitting soil and mud into the drain. My heart wouldn't stop hammering. My hands were shaking. I tried to tell myself I'd had some kind of sleepwalking episode. Stress, maybe. Too much cheap whiskey and isolation. But I started locking the doors at night. All of them. I even nailed shut the windows. I didn't know what I was afraid of, not really. But something about that statue stayed lodged behind my ribs like a splinter. A week later, I heard the whisper again. This time, I was inside. It was almost midnight. I was reading by the stove when I heard it drift through the room like smoke. Daniel. I froze. The voice was soft, breathy, female. It came again. Daniel. It sounded like it was coming from beneath the floorboards. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I went back to the hill. The angel's mouth seemed wider. It wasn't, I told myself. It was a trick of the light. The shadows, the cracks. But the illusion of change was subtle and terrifying. Like the statue had been caught mid-word, and I'd just walked in on it speaking. I walked around the base looking for signs of disturbance. Found none. But on the stone pedestal, someone had carved something into the marble. It looked fresh, new, 5 words, "I hear you down there." I stepped back. My stomach dropped. There were no footprints, no tools, no debris, just the words. Clean, precise, cut into the stone like a confession. That was the day I started hearing the others. Not just whispers. Full voices. In the walls. Beneath the cottage. Out in the graveyard at night. Sometimes crying, sometimes laughing. Always just far enough that I couldn't quite make out the words. I stopped going to town. Iris came by once. I didn't answer the door. She left a note tucked under a rock on the porch. If you've been near it, it's too late. Don't listen. Don't talk back. Talk back? I hadn't, not yet, but the voices knew things. They knew about my past. About the girl I left in Chicago. About the baby we lost. About the night I drank too much and hit a man crossing the road. Left him crawling in the ditch because I was too afraid to stop. They whispered all of it. Not accusations. Just reminders. They wanted me to answer. I lasted another 3 weeks. That night the whisper came again. Soft. So gentle it could have been wind. Daniel, come up just for a moment. It sounded like my mother. She died when I was 15. Car crash. Mangled body and blood-soaked upholstery. I never got to say goodbye. I stood in the doorway, the moon bright and brittle above the trees. The cemetery stretched out in silver and shadow. And on the hill I saw movement. The angel. Her head had turned. Not much. Just a tilt. But it was new. Fresh. The marble beneath her neck was cracked deeper now. Flaked around the base. Her mouth was wider. I stepped outside, walked up the gravel path, past the leaning stones and rustling grass. The air was cold. Too cold for October. My breath fogged in front of me. I climbed the hill. The statue loomed above me, vast and silent. I looked into her face and she looked back. Her eyes were hollow, but behind them something shimmered. Not light, not reflection, movement. I reached out, not knowing why. She spoke. Not aloud, not with voice. The words came into my head like a spike. Instant. Crippling. Not in English. Not even in sound. But I understood. I know what you did. I fell to my knees. My nose was bleeding. My ears rang. And then from beneath me I heard them. Hands scrabbling in the dirt. Fingernails on stone. From deep under the hill, something was trying to rise. I ran, locked the door, barricaded it with furniture. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. The next day I packed a bag and left. Got as far as Highway 19 before the engine died. When I lifted the hood, I found dirt packed into the engine block. Wet, clinging soil. I hitchhiked back. Something wouldn't let me leave. The closer I got to the statue, the clearer the whispers became. Not voices anymore. Laughter. Not mocking. Not joyful, just waiting. They were always waiting. The next night I sat in the cottage with every light on. The wind screamed outside. The angel's head had turned completely now. Her face pointed down the hill, mouth gaping wide. The whisper came one final time. This time it was my own voice. Daniel, come down here. I opened the floorboards. Underneath, the dirt pulsed like something breathing. I began to dig. I don't remember how long I dug. Hours. Maybe days. My fingernails split. My hands bled. But I couldn't stop. And then I found it. A chamber. Stone-lined. Carved with runes that twisted when you looked at them too long. In the center was a pit. And in the pit, bones, hundreds of them, children, all small, all broken, and above the pit, floating like ash in water, a shape, not a body, not a person, just a face, my face. It smiled. And then I was falling. I woke in my bed, dirt in my mouth, nails cracked, chest burning. But the angel was gone. Just an empty pedestal now. The hill is still there. The graves still whisper. And at night I feel her watching from the woods. She's inside me now. I can't leave. And if you're reading this, If you've heard the whispers, if the angel calls your name, it's already too late, she knows who you are. Story number 3, they say there's a light that never goes out. Not in the romantic way that songs talk about, but in the older, colder sense. The sort of thing that stays burning not out of love or hope, but because something darker wants it that way. That light sits in a cemetery not far from where I grew up, in a forgotten stretch of Tennessee called Merritt's Hollow. It's not on any tourist map, and it's not even marked with a proper sign, just a rusted iron gate tucked off an overgrown back road, and a wooden board that once bore the cemetery's name but now only shows black streaks where the paint ran in the rain. The cemetery itself is old Civil War era, maybe older. Some of the stones are so eroded you can't read a single mark on them. Time's eaten away at everything in that place, everything but the lantern. It sits atop a 5-foot wrought iron post in the furthest corner, where the brush gets thick and the trees grow gnarled and close. It's just a simple lantern, glass panels, black frame, curled iron handle, but it burns every night. Always. No one ever sees it flicker on. It's just there once the sun sets, a steady yellow-orange flame that somehow never runs out of oil, never dims, never fails. The old folks in town call it the Watcher's Light. They say it's been burning since the last cholera outbreak, since long before electricity ever touched the hollow. And they'll warn you, if you ever go up there and try to put it out, you won't come back. Not that anyone's really tried in recent years. The stories have a way of sticking, but back when I was a kid, there were a few. I remember when Bobby Sharp disappeared. That was 91, I think. He was 17, a grade above me, big kid with a mean streak and too much pride. Thought the whole lantern thing was just backwoods folklore. One Halloween night, Bobby got drunk on stolen whiskey and said he was going to blow it out, stomp it flat, and leave a beer can in its place. He never came home. Sheriff Traylor organized a search party, but nobody found a damn thing. Not a shoe, not a footprint. Just his rusted pickup parked at the gate with the keys still in the ignition, and a 6-pack of Milwaukee's Best on the passenger seat. 5 full, 1 half empty and warm. His mother moved away a year later. I didn't think about the lantern much after high school. Moved to Nashville for a while. Got married. Got divorced. You know how it goes. Life stacked up like junk in an attic, and I let all those old stories collect dust. That is, until my dad died. He was the caretaker of Merritt's Hollow Cemetery for nearly 30 years. Never talked much about it. Said it was quiet work and paid just enough. When I got the call from the lawyer, I wasn't surprised to learn he'd left me the property. There wasn't much else he had. What surprised me was the letter he'd written, left in a sealed envelope with my name on it. It said only this: "Don't touch the lantern. Not even once. If it goes out, it doesn't stay dark. I tried. That's how your mother died." My mother had been dead since I was 6, drowned in the river behind our house, or so I'd been told, slipped while washing laundry, cracked her head on a rock. That's what my dad had always said. I never questioned it. I wish I never opened that letter. Still, I went back. The cemetery was overgrown, like the hollow had tried to reclaim it in my father's absence. Grass past the knee. Ivy choking the fences. I spent my first 2 days with a weed trimmer and a machete, sweating under the humid September sky. Didn't even look toward the lantern, not yet. I knew where it was, could feel it in the air like a pressure system. But I wasn't ready. The 3rd night I saw the glow. It was exactly as I remembered from childhood. Just a faint pulse of warm light in the darkest part of the graveyard, like a single candle at the bottom of a dry well. I told myself I wouldn't go near it, that I'd do what my dad said. But something about that glow pulls at you. You think it's curiosity at first, then it feels like gravity. By the 4th night, I was standing 20 feet from it. The flame didn't flicker. It hovered behind the glass like something alive, pulsing steady. The iron post was thick with rust and black mildew, but the lantern was pristine. No cracks, no soot. The glass looked polished, clean. I backed away. That night I dreamed of whispering. Soft voices. Not words I could understand. Just the cadence of them, low and constant like wind through reeds. In the dream I stood beside the lantern and stared into the flame. And in that flame I saw a face, my mother's. When I woke, my shirt was damp. Not sweat, water. My skin smelled like river mud I nearly packed up that morning. Threw everything in the truck and made it to the edge of the hollow before I pulled over. Sat there for a long time, gripping the wheel like it could anchor me to something sane. I thought about the letter again. About what my dad wrote. If it goes out, it doesn't stay dark. What the hell did that mean? I started researching. Found a few old articles at the town library, most written on typewriters yellowed with age. They mentioned a cholera quarantine in 1874, one that wiped out nearly half the Hollow's population. The dead had been buried fast and without ceremony. It said people were buried alive by mistake, that a few of the graves were dug too shallow, that some of the first settlers spoke of seeing lights above the plots at night. Lanterns, always burning, never lit. The last note was from a preacher in 1881, a handwritten journal entry that had been copied into a local history pamphlet. He wrote, "The flame keeps them dreaming. It must stay lit. To snuff it out is to wake them, and they wake hungry." I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I found muddy footprints on the porch, barefoot, small. Leading up to the door and stopping, I installed a floodlight, bolted the doors, started keeping a pistol on the nightstand. The flame never changed, but things around it did. One night I saw a figure standing near it. Just for a second. Looked like a man, tall and hunched, arms too long, but when I blinked, it was gone. The next night, the whispering started for real. Not in dreams. While I was awake. It came through the walls like radio static, murmurs that seemed to come from under the floor, from the corners, from inside the pipes. I couldn't make out words at first, just the rhythm of them. But eventually I heard my name, over and over. One night I followed the sound. Walked out past the graves, cold dew soaking my jeans. The lantern pulsed in the distance. As I approached, the whispering grew louder. Not just voices, moans, ragged breath. The sound of something being dragged across earth. I reached out toward the lantern, then I heard her. A woman's voice right behind me. "Please, help me, I'm so cold." I turned. No one. But the ground beside me was sinking. A slow indent forming in the grass like something pressing up from underneath. I ran. I didn't stop running until I was inside. Bolted in, clutching the pistol with white knuckles. The next morning, I saw a name carved into the bark of the tree beside the lantern. Elizabeth Caro, my mother's maiden name. There's no grave for her in Merritt's Hollow. But I dug where the ground had sunk. 6 feet down, I found a box, not a coffin, just a wooden crate, old rotted. Inside was a dress, molded lace, water-damaged photographs, and a jawbone. I reported none of this. I couldn't explain it, and I didn't want to try. But something had changed. That night, the lantern burned brighter. I stayed inside, closed every blind, pushed furniture against the doors. The light seeped through the cracks in the boards, thick and honey-colored, like it wanted in. I made it 3 more nights. Then I did the thing I wasn't supposed to do. I tried to put it out. I told myself I had a plan, that I was going to test it. Just snuff the flame and relight it, see if anything happened. But I was lying to myself. I just wanted it gone. I wanted the whispering to stop. Wanted the faces at the window to stop pressing against the glass with their black mouths moving in. Reverse. I waited until just past midnight. Took my father's lighter, a can of kerosene, and walked the path I'd cleared with the machete. The lantern looked at me. That's the only way I can say it. It looked. I reached out. The flame danced. Not in the wind. Toward me, I opened the panel. Inside there was no wick, no oil. Just the flame, hovering, floating. I blew on it. The light bent away, resisting. I blew harder. It dimmed, and then it went out. The moment it died, the world changed. The darkness wasn't normal. It was thick, wet. It had weight. I couldn't see the path. Couldn't hear the crickets. Even the wind stopped. Then the breathing started. Not mine, around me. Dozens of voices. All gasping. All whispering. A rustling like hundreds of hands moving through the grass. I turned and ran. The dark followed. I didn't make it 10 feet before I felt fingers on my back. Cold. Boneless. They didn't pull. They pushed. I hit the ground hard, rolled, fired into the dark. Nothing. Then I saw the light. Not from the lantern, from the graves. They were glowing. Each one, a pale, sickly green. Shapes were rising one by one. Thin, gray things with hollow eyes and mouths wide open, too wide, all of them whispering in voices that weren't theirs. One stepped toward me, bent at the neck, and in a perfect imitation of my mother's voice it said, "You let me wake." I scrambled up and ran, screamed, sobbed, I don't remember unlocking the cottage door. Just the slam behind me. The scrape of the bolt. The light inside flickering. They didn't follow me in. Not yet. But I saw them at the edge of the trees, standing, watching, waiting. That was 4 nights ago. I haven't left since, but I see the light again, burning. The lantern's lit. I didn't relight it, but it's burning again, and I don't think it forgives me because each night, one grave glows and each morning one disappears. The ground smooths over. The stone vanishes, like the dead are being called back, and I think I started it. I think I let them wake, and I don't know how to stop it. If you come to Merritt's Hollow, don't go to the cemetery, don't look at the light, don't listen to the voices, and never, under any circumstance, try to put out the lantern, because it never burned out for a reason, and some things should never ever be allowed to sleep. Story number 4, there's something wrong with the fog out here. It moves too slow, too heavy, like it's watching you instead of drifting by. I never believed in that kind of talk before I moved to Lorne's Hollow. Thought ghost stories were just that, stories. Something small towns passed around like pie recipes. But now, every time that thick milky fog rolls through and creeps into the trees, I lock every door, draw the curtains, and wait for the sound I pray never comes again. Children's laughter. I took the job as cemetery groundskeeper last September. I'd just left Louisville, needed a change of pace after a divorce that hollowed me out and a construction accident that wrecked my knee. The Hollow sounded quiet, cheap, and simple. Just me, a rented trailer on the edge of town, and Stonefield Cemetery. I remember when I first saw it. Rows of crooked headstones rising from yellowing grass, surrounded by a rust-eaten iron fence. No chapel, no mausoleum. Just the stones, the weeds, and a gravel path leading into fog that never seemed to lift past sundown. Most of the graves dated back to the late 1800s. Names you don't hear anymore. Silas, Mabel, Jedediah. All adults. No infants. No children. The caretaker before me was an old man named Elroy Sanders. He left in the middle of the night. Didn't give notice. Just packed up and vanished. His house sat empty, dishes still in the sink, boots by the door. The town clerk, a narrow-eyed woman named Mrs. Redding, told me not to worry. Said Elroy was starting to slip, and old men like that sometimes needed to go home on their own terms. The 3rd night I was there, the fog came. I remember it clearly because it rolled in fast. One moment I could see the ridge. The next it was like someone had draped a wet bedsheet over the world. The trees vanished. The grass turned white with dew. Everything went silent. The bugs stopped. The breeze died. Then I heard it, laughter, high-pitched, sharp, children. I froze. My trailer sits just beyond the cemetery's edge. I thought maybe kids had wandered in messing around. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The fog was thick as wool. Visibility maybe 10 feet. The laughter stopped the moment my boots hit the ground. Dead silence. I swept the beam back and forth across the path. The graves. The old iron gate. Nothing. The next morning, I found footprints in the grass. Small ones. Barefoot. Maybe size 4 or 5. Dozens of them. Scattered around the older section of the cemetery. They circled some of the headstones, like the kids had been playing Ring Around the Rosie. There were even handprints pressed into the dew. Tiny, perfect handprints, some on the stone, some on the grass, some in places no kid should be able to reach. I walked the whole perimeter. No breaks in the fence, no gaps under the gate, no signs of anyone entering or leaving. I told myself it was an animal, or maybe a prank. I didn't believe that. But I told myself anyway. By the end of the 1st week, I'd stopped sleeping through the night. It always started the same. The fog would come in just after midnight. The laughter would follow. Sometimes just one voice, sometimes many. And it always felt like it was coming from behind me. No matter which way I turned, I started keeping a log. A notebook. Just something to help me feel grounded. I'd write the time, the weather, what I heard. One night I wrote 3:14 a.m. whispering. Not English. Not words, just sounds. Another night, 2:37 a.m. Laughter followed by singing. Off-key. Girl's voice. Hummed London Bridge, that one stuck with me. I hadn't heard that song since I was a kid. It made my skin crawl. On the 10th night I saw them, just silhouettes at first, small, no taller than my waist. Figures darting between the headstones, never fully visible. Just the shape of arms, legs, round heads. They moved wrong, too fast, too smooth, like marionettes pulled by invisible strings. I tried to chase them once. Got about 10 feet into the cemetery before something cold brushed the back of my neck. I turned and the fog seemed to close in tighter, like a curtain pulling shut. That was the first night I dreamed of the grave. There was no headstone in the dream. Just a sunken patch of earth and a child's toy on top, a red rubber ball scuffed and dirty. I knelt down and the ball rolled toward me. I picked it up and something underneath the soil screamed. I woke gasping. My bed was soaked. The sheets were damp and smelled like wet leaves. That morning I found the ball, right outside my trailer, just sitting there in the grass, still wet with dew, same size, same faded red. I kicked it as hard as I could into the woods. It didn't bounce, just disappeared into the trees. I called the sheriff, told him someone was messing around in the cemetery at night, maybe trying to scare me off. He came by, nodded through my story and said, "Don't be too quick to go looking for answers out here. Hollow's old. It remembers things. Not exactly helpful." I stayed up the next night with a camera, set it to record, pointed it at the oldest part of the cemetery. It ran for 6 hours. When I reviewed the footage the next morning, the first 3 hours were normal, then the fog came. And at exactly 2:13 a.m., the camera picked up movement, flickers, like shapes passing in front of the lens. The image blurred, twitched. The audio cut in and out, then the laughter began. Soft, childlike, then louder. A face appeared on screen, just for a second. Pale, hollow eyes, grinning too wide, then gone. The footage ended with static. I deleted the video, tried to forget the face. But that same day the toy came back. This time it was on my doorstep. I didn't touch it. I didn't go outside. Just stared through the window for hours. Then the knock started. 3 quick taps at the door. I thought it was the wind. Then again, louder, closer, like tiny fists pounding on the walls. I shouted. Told whoever it was to go to hell. They laughed, not angry laughter. Not mocking, just play happy, cruel play. That night I found handprints on my trailer windows inside. Smudges that ran in circles. Small palms. Sticky residue like sap. The next morning my phone was dead. Wouldn't charge. The lines were down. I couldn't even get the truck to start. I was stuck. The fog came early that night. By 10 p.m. I couldn't see past the porch. I locked the door, sat in the middle of the floor with a flashlight and the pistol I swore I'd never use again. The laughter came around 11. Then the voices. They weren't speaking. They were calling, "Come play, we see you. You're lonely." Then one voice, a whisper right in my ear, "Don't you miss her?" They knew. They knew about my daughter, Grace. She was 7 when she died. Car accident. Hit and run. A driver hopped the sidewalk and never stopped. She'd been holding my hand. I looked away for 1 second, just 1 second. That night I heard her voice in the fog. "Daddy, come find me." I wept. I broke. I opened the door. The fog poured in like smoke from a furnace. Thick and choking. My flashlight barely cut a path through it. But the laughter led me. I walked to the grave with no name. It wasn't marked, but I knew. Same as the dream. Same red ball sitting on the soil. I knelt. The earth was soft. Fresh. I brushed it with my fingers, and it crumbled like ash. Something shifted beneath. A hand reached up. Small. White. Grasped mine. I should have pulled back. Should have run, but I didn't. Because for a second it felt like her hand. Like Grace. I looked down. It wasn't her. It wasn't human. Its skin was paper thin and stretched over bone. Its nails were black. And its eyes, when it pulled itself halfway from the dirt and looked up at me, its eyes were hollow. Not empty, full of every wrong thing I'd ever dreamed. It grinned. Then the others came. From behind the stones, out of the trees, crawling through the mist on hands and feet. Dozens of them. Pale, child-sized shapes with twisted smiles and necks that craned too far. They circled the grave. They sang. "Ring around the rosy." I stumbled back. Fired the gun. The flash lit the fog like a strobe. Nothing fell. Nothing bled. They just giggled. I ran back to the trailer, slammed the door, locked it, collapsed against the wall. They didn't follow. But I could hear them, scratching, always scratching. They come back every night now. The ball shows up in different places, sometimes in the sink, sometimes on my pillow. The fog never leaves, and the laughter, God, the laughter, it seeps into my dreams. Into the walls. Into me. I tried to leave once. Packed up and drove toward the highway. Didn't matter. 10 minutes out, I saw the fog. It was waiting in the trees. I drove through it and ended up right back at the gate. No turns, no U-turn. Just back. They won't let me go. I think they're waiting for me to forget, to come play, to join the game. But I won't. Not yet. I leave this note here in case someone else takes the job. If you do, listen carefully. If you hear children laughing in the fog, run. If you see the red ball, don't touch it. And if one of them whispers with a voice you love, don't answer. They are not children. They never were. And they don't want to play. They want to keep you. Story number 5. I never meant to dig up a grave. Let me say that right from the start. I'm not the kind of person who does things like that. I'm a high school biology teacher from Crenshaw County, for Christ's sake. I pay my taxes, water my lawn, and don't get involved in anything messier than parent-teacher conferences. But sometimes life doesn't give a damn about who you are or what you believe. Sometimes it drags you down into the dirt with both hands. It started the week after my Uncle Ray died. He was the caretaker for Hollow Pine Cemetery, a forgotten little patch of land buried deep in the Kentucky woods. 5 miles outside a town most people don't even realize they've driven through until they're already past it. You won't find Hollow Pines on Google Maps. It's the kind of place that disappears the moment you stop thinking about it. Ray lived alone on the cemetery grounds for nearly 40 years in a 2-room shack built into the edge of the hill. No phone, no internet, no close friends. He didn't drive. He got his groceries once a month from a local church delivery van. As a kid, I used to think he was just one of those strange old men who preferred silence to company. But now I think he was hiding something. The day after the funeral, I was asked to come pick up his things. No one else in the family wanted to. My parents both passed away years ago, and my sister hadn't spoken to Ray since the 90s. So I drove up from Lexington and found the shack exactly the way I remembered it. Weather-worn, paint peeling, screen door hanging loose. The inside smelled like cedar and dust, with stacks of old journals piled on every surface and an iron stove that looked like it hadn't been lit in years. I only intended to spend the afternoon sorting through his stuff, but something about the place felt sticky, not physically but emotionally, like grief had settled into the walls and wouldn't leave. I stayed the night. That was my first mistake. It was sometime around 3 a.m. when I heard it. Not a noise exactly, more like a feeling that pressed in from every corner, the kind of sensation that forces you awake, heart already pounding like your subconscious knows something your conscious mind can't yet name. I sat up in the narrow cot Ray had used for a bed, blinked at the shadows dancing on the ceiling. The moonlight was thin, silver coming through the curtainless window. The wind had picked up, or at least I thought it was the wind. Then I heard the knocking, 3 sharp raps, not on the door. From beneath the floorboards I didn't move, just sat there, cold sweat soaking my shirt, listening. Nothing after that. Just silence again, stretching long and tight. I told myself it was a dream. But when I went outside the next morning, I noticed something odd. Ray's grave, the one they'd just filled 2 days before, looked disturbed. The dirt had sunk in, uneven, as though something had shifted underneath. I told myself it was natural. Settling soil, maybe the rain. But when I bent down for a closer look, I saw something else. Scratches. 4 deep, curved gouges in the headstone, like fingernails. No initials yet carved into it, just a blank gray slab with fresh claw marks. I backed away, mouth dry, and decided I'd had enough. I grabbed the last box of journals and threw it into the truck bed. As I pulled away, I caught movement in the rearview mirror. A shadow. Just beside the grave, standing, long and impossibly thin. I looked again, nothing. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I opened the top journal, the one dated 1986. Inside were pages and pages of cramped handwriting. Ray had never been one for letters, but the man could write. The first few entries were routine. Grass trimming, fence repair, notes about the squirrels digging around plot 28. Then it turned. It's back. Saw it again tonight at the edge of the tree line. Same shape. Too tall, no face. Just watching. Always watching. Woke to tapping on the window, but it's 7 feet off the ground, no prints. No footprints either. I know better now. I stopped burying them alone. That last line hooked into me like a fishhook. I flipped to the next page. The handwriting was shaky, frantic. It gets into the ground. Not sure how. You can't bury anything alone out here. You need a second body. Doesn't matter who. Doesn't matter how old. Just something to keep it company. I closed the journal. Didn't open another one for 3 days, but the nightmares didn't stop. In them, I stood at the edge of Ray's grave. The soil would part like soup and a long, pale arm would reach out, grabbing for my ankle. I'd wake up screaming, convinced someone was breathing behind me. The room always felt too warm after that, like something had been standing too close for too long. Eventually, I started asking questions. Quietly. I drove into town and stopped by the local diner. The waitress, a woman with sun-spotted hands and a smoker's voice, remembered Ray. Said he used to come in once a year. Never stayed long. Always looked tired, like he hadn't slept in weeks. I asked her if he'd ever mentioned anything strange about the cemetery. She gave me a look like I'd just farted in church. Hollow Pines is old, she said. Built on pain, if you believe the stories. They say it used to be an execution ground during the frontier days. Long before there were fences or markers. The land don't forget. Ray knew that. I asked what she meant. She shook her head. He told me once, real quiet, like it hurt him to say it, that the thing under the cemetery doesn't like being alone. I went back to the shack, started digging through the journals again. The entries got worse. One described finding teeth on the porch. Human teeth. Another talked about dreams full of screaming children, faces melting in the soil. The last journal ended with a sentence that kept looping in my head. If I die alone, it will come for me. But if I'm not alone, maybe it sleeps. I couldn't shake the image. Ray dying in that bed, heart failing in the middle of the night, knowing what waited in the dirt. Maybe that's why he stopped seeing people. Maybe that's why he pushed everyone away, because he didn't want to bring anyone with him. I should have left. Driven away, erased the place from my memory. Instead, I dug up the grave. It took me most of the night. No backhoe, just a shovel and a headlamp. The dirt was heavy, the air full of that rotting, sweet, sour smell that doesn't belong above ground. I reached the coffin around 4 a.m. Simple pine box. No brass, no seal. I opened it. Ray's face was contorted, mouth stretched open in a scream that never ended. His fingernails were bloodied. The inside of the lid was shredded with claw marks. But he wasn't alone. There was something in there with him. Something long, thin. It curled along the bottom of the coffin like a second skeleton. But it wasn't bones. It was flesh, damp and gray, with limbs that bent the wrong way and a head like a melted doll. Its mouth was split down the middle. Black teeth filled the seams. Its eyes were sewn shut with hair, and its arms were wrapped around my uncle tightly, like a child clinging to a parent. Then it moved. Not much. Just a twitch of one finger. I dropped the lid, started shoveling the dirt back in. My breaths came in sharp gasps. I wasn't crying, but my face was wet. I couldn't stop. I didn't stop until the grave was full again. I left the shovel sticking in the earth, didn't even brush the dirt from my hands. I slept in my truck that night. In the morning, there were footprints around the grave, long and narrow, like something had walked in circles all night. I left Hollow Pines, moved back to the city, tried to forget, but some nights I dream of the shack. I hear tapping on my window from the 3rd floor, and sometimes just before dawn, I see a second shadow on the sidewalk, thin, long, and waiting. If you've made it this far, I have only one thing left to say. Stay away from Hollow Pines, burn this story. Forget my name and never go near that shack. Whatever you do, don't visit the grave with the blank headstone or follow the second shadow when it moves beside your own. That thing, whatever it is, still waits in the dark soil. Long, patient, and lonely. But if stories like this keep you up at night, if you felt the cold breath behind your neck just now or caught movement in the corner of your eye that shouldn't have been there, then you're exactly who I'm talking to. Like this story? Want more unsettling true tales and creeping dread that sticks with you long after the lights go out? Subscribe for weekly horror stories that claw into your mind and don't let go. Hit the notification bell so you're the first to hear the whispers when the next one drops. Have your own ghost story or unexplained encounter? Share it in the comments. You never know who else has heard the same voice in the dark. But remember, some graves should stay buried.